So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to the third of our Trailblazers sessions, which are focusing around topics around soft skills. It's been a really great time to actually run this series of events. We've had some really great speakers so far. We've had Gordon Lee and Joseph Kuban last week, and it's funny thing because it's like we planned five sessions. This being session 4. But some of the feedback I've got coming through has been really great, and there seems to be a bit of an interest for more of this kind of content. So really, I'd love to hear from people in the feedback that we do, what kind of things they would like to see in the future. That there will be a link to the feedback form at the end of this event. So today, I want to begin to pass over to our guest speaker for today, which is Michael Grandel, who from the National Aquarium, and I'll let Michael introduce himself a bit more in just a second. But just want to say that in terms of questions and answers this week, we're going to try to be a bit more flexible and answer questions during the presentation itself. So if you've got any questions at all, please still feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen that you should see, or in the chat as well, and we'll try our best to kind of address those questions during the presentation. And if there's any that we don't answer in the presentation itself, we'll see how many we can get through after the main presentation has finished as well. So that being said, I'm going to pass over to Michael and let Michael introduce himself and take us into our topic for today. So Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for creating this series and welcoming me to be part of it. My name is Mike Grandel. I am near Baltimore. I work for the National Aquarium. I'm the Director of Business Intelligence. I've been working with the Salesforce ecosystem for 9 years or so. I have a handful of certifications. I'm the co-leader of the Baltimore Administrators User Group, a part of the Trailblazer Mentorship Program. So I enjoy working with the community and sort of figuring out what people are interested in and helping people try to advance their careers. I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with Salesforce. And when Mark mentioned this series, I jumped on it immediately because I do feel like a lot of the trailhead and a lot of the thinking in the Salesforce ecosystem is very tech heavy. And obviously you need to know the tool, you need to know what to do, but I think there's a lot of soft skills that can really take you from being, pretty good at your job to being exceptional or great at your job. So we can get started if you want. Let me share my screen, Mark.
You should be able to share your screen. Yes, Mike.
Yeah. Yep. Which one? Actually, hang on one sec. I want this one. All right. All right. So you can see the presentation? Yes?
I can, yes. Thank you.
All right. We're in good shape here. So as I mentioned, I'm with the National Aquarium in Baltimore. You guys can find me on Twitter, Trailblazer Me, or LinkedIn, or whatever. I'll be happy to connect and talk with anyone after the fact with any follow-up questions or unrelated questions to this presentation. So today we're going to talk about information discovery. So we need to talk about what is that, and then the types of it, how to figure out and why knowing your stakeholders matter. A little bit of artifacts on how to document certain things, and then we'll get some tips and some questions. As I was putting this together, quite frankly, I sort of realized that the soft skills part, the what to do in the room when you're meeting with someone, is maybe there's less to it than I thought. I can distill it down to a few things. So as I started putting it together, I really started to think about how you kind of need to do your pre-work first and understand what your objective is and your agenda before you kind of start going into a discovery session. So I'm going to go through some of those things. And again, Mark, please feel free to interrupt with any pertinent questions at any point.
That's fine. Just one quick note, though. I don't know if it was intentional, but your presentation isn't full screen, so it might be a bit small for the viewers.
Are you seeing well, maybe I'm sharing the wrong one.
I'm just seeing.
I have it open on 2 browsers.
Cool.
This one. This is the one. Is that the one where you see it full screen?
That's the full screen. Yes.
Great. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was sharing the wrong screen then. So let me go back to this. I have it on the side on the other screen so that I can read the notes. So here's the full screen. So there's sort of the overview slide. Here's the agenda. So we're talking about what is information discovery. Okay, so I lifted this here right out of one of the Salesforce trailheads, actually for partners, called customer-centric discovery for Salesforce partners, because Salesforce encourages their partners to do the same sort of things that I think that we need to do, whether we're administrators or consultants. And one of the things I wanted to say up front is the lines in between job roles and functions in the Salesforce ecosystem, and I guess any of the tech industries, or maybe any industry at all, they kind of blur. So I want to try to set some of our terms. Mostly what we're going to be talking about today with the information discovery is more something that you would think of a business analyst as doing, more than a pure Salesforce administrator. There are environments, there are projects, there are teams that are large enough where you might be a business administrator and not necessarily be a Salesforce admin. That definitely does exist, particularly on large projects and with consulting companies. But normally, if you're a Salesforce customer and you have a small to mid-size organization, not a super giant org, you're probably going to need your admin to fulfill business administrator roles, at least in certain instances, if not be the entirety of all the business administrator. I think it's very important that an admin understands what the business is trying to accomplish and why they want to accomplish it, and how the users think and how the users work and how the managers think and work, and not just be someone that is reactive to what it is the customer says that they want, and then you sort of take orders, because there needs to be someone sort of driving, are we doing the things that actually will help us deliver the objectives that we want to deliver, not just someone says we need to do this, so we go ahead and do it. And in most of your examples in Trailhead, a lot of the times, and I love it, and I know why they do it, but you'll get the company, and you'll have Allison Wheeler or whomever, the VP of marketing, will give you all of these wonderful requirements for your project. And of course, if you're training and testing for an administrator on that narrow band of what an administrator is, that makes sense. But in the history of life, I've never had a VP of anything walk into a session with me and give me comprehensive, detailed requirements of exactly what it is they want. They more have vague notions, and they know the objectives and the outcomes that they want to achieve, and they don't necessarily know how they want to get there. And they want you to kind of walk them through that. And again, in a huge project, with a big firm, you may have someone that may not be a Salesforce admin that can do the BA part of it, but realistically, your admin is your first line of defense as doing the business administration stuff. So you want to know your customer, you want to try to think things through from your customer's point of view. You want to connect with your customer, and then you want to sort of create strategy with your customer. So all this stuff, which is right out of the Salesforce centric discovery for Salesforce partners, customer centric discovery for Salesforce partners, is kind of what you want to do. So I think we also need to talk about types of discovery. I thought about this a little bit, and I think again, we probably wordsmith these and come up with 45 different subdivisions of all these things, but trying to keep it simple at a high level. There are three kinds of discovery sessions that one might be part of, and I think that's going to inform the information you're trying to get and why you're trying to get it, and what you're going to do with it from there. So you may be coming with a request for a new app or a new project, right? And this could run. This is where I talk about we could get millions of subdivisions if you wanted. This could be, if you're a consulting company or working for a consulting firm, it could be sort of pre-sales. It could be that. It could be after the sales have already been made, and you're meeting with a client for the first time to go over what it is that they need, whether they need a series of apps, or they need one specific app, or they need an app to sort of be redefined and be updated. But with this is probably the biggest or classic one, if you will, where you're starting from kind of the very beginning, and there's no app, there's no Salesforce org, there's no whatever, or maybe there is a Salesforce org, but this is a new app that is completely unrelated to the things that are already there. Uh, but there's also versions of it where we're talking about we want to do discovery. It's kind of a never-ending cycle. When we're demoing the new app or the project that we've delivered, there's a lot of discovery there. It's sort of a training / information. It's a push pull where you're trying to explain to the customer what it is that you've delivered or what these ideas are, but you're also at the same time you're trying to pick up on what it is that they like and don't like about it, what works and doesn't work, and what immediately connects as intuitive, and what sort of gives them that sort of question mark over their heads where they don't know exactly what that means or why that is. And then you also have the situation where users come and they have an existing app and they ask for a feature. Well, I mean that could be whether simple as they want a new pick list, they want a report, they want a screen flow. I mean, it could be a million things. They want to implement an actual new feature like Einstein Prediction Builder or something like that. But even then, you definitely want to take the time to do these same sort of things and understand what it is they really want, not what it is they think they want. Because for one thing, I mean, this applies to humanity in general, I suppose, but specifically to this kind of project, people aren't going to ask you for things that they don't know exist. As a Salesforce admin, when you're keeping up with all the features, you're keeping up with the new releases, all those sort of things, you may be aware of, something new that's coming out, Flow Orchestrator, for example, that's coming out in the next release. They're not going to put it in terms of Salesforce feature language, but they may not even know that kind of thing exists, or that you can make a variable or dynamic lightning component on a page that only certain people can see, or only certain people can see them under certain conditions. They might not know to ask for that kind of thing. They might come to you and say, oh, well, can you put this section, this whatever, like devalue it on the screen so that I don't have to see it all the time. Put it at the bottom because it's getting in my way and I don't need it. It's not something that I can use. They might not know that, oh, well, you could just go into the Lightning page and make the visibility section of that component based on their profile or certain data element or something like that. In which case, you don't have to necessarily bury it to the bottom of the page because it might be important to somebody else. So this is the kind of give and take that you need to really find out why it is they want what they want, not necessarily just understand what it is that they want, because you're the trained professional. You're the one that can speak to them about things that they couldn't consider or they didn't know were possibilities. So, those are the kind of things that, you kind of need to look at it sort of holistically and make a recommendation or a suggestion or decision from there, whatever your level of empowerment is in your organization. So, and then let's talk about the stakeholders a little bit too, because I think that dramatically informs the situations that you're going to be dealing with. So, who are these requests coming from, and or who have you been assigned to discuss what the project level with is? Kind of breaking the roles in the three different groups of executives, managers, and users. They all have different needs. They all have different expectations. They all have a different vocabulary. They all are going to use the system in a different manner. So you need to understand who these people are and what it is that you need to get from them and what it is that you need to deliver for them. Your executives are typically, they're gonna look at the end results, right? They're probably not going to use the actual application and the screens that you make to do whatever it is, whether you're putting in a service cloud or sales cloud or some sort of custom object. They want to see the results. They want to know how many customers are being helped, what the sales are, what the timeframes are, those kind of high level outputs. So when you're talking to them, you're not going to ask them questions about, well, how do you process this transaction or whatever, because they probably don't know. That's not something that's interested. But you're going to have, and again, you could subdivide these in numerous other categories, but just going with the paradigm here of the three different groups, you need to keep a bunch of different plates spinning at the same time, understanding that you're delivering different things for different people. And also realize that sometimes what might be considered best to deliver for one of these groups might be not necessarily the best for another one of these groups. So you sort of have to understand how important things are to them. Again, try to figure out why these are important to them. To the degree that you encounter something that isn't that doesn't resonate, doesn't make sense, or it can be kind of irrational, you need to sort of figure out if you can replace in their minds what they think that they're trying to get with this with another way to go, something like that. On your manager level, they're going to be a little more hands-on the application, but they're probably also not going to be as fixated. Of course, they're not going to be as fixated on the how does data get entered, how does the data get used. Again, they're looking at some different KPIs, some different key performance indicators maybe than the executives, in that they might not just be looking at the bottom line and see how much revenue was saved or how many case deflections are managed by Einstein bots or whatever, but they're looking to make sure that all of the staff that they have that's using the system is using it correctly. Do they have the right permissions? Can they see the right things and not see the things that they don't need to be seen? But they're probably still more looking at a little bit more aggregate information than each individual transaction. And then you have the users, of course, and the users could come in a variety of different functions. Not all users are going to be using the application in the same way, and that's an important distinction. But what I want to draw your attention to here is that you're mostly designing the system for the users. Okay, yes, you don't want to lose sight of what it is the executives need. You don't want to lose sight of it what the managers need. You want to keep all of them. But by and large, the way the screens are laid out, the flow of everything is going to be based on how the user needs things to go. Are you going to use the standard app or the console app? Are you going to use how are you going to link records and be able to find records and minimize the number of clicks? Are you the screen flows that you're going to build, the reports and the dashboards that you're going to put on that page or something like that? I mean, there's a lot of different things. You just want to think of the user. And an important thing not to lose sight of is the users may not really want the new system. I mean, again, this is what I'm saying on the previous slide. You have, are they coming to you with a new feature, or is this a brand new app? This is where this can kind of split a little bit. If a user's coming to you with a new feature, that could come in a couple different flavors as well. It could come in, the way we have it currently configured, I can't stand it. Can you fix this? Can you add this? And that's one thing that you want to kind of deal with, versus, hey, I'm really using the system. I like it, but it could be that much better if we did this. What if we do this? That's one sort of thing. But on the idea that it's a whole brand new application, they're brand new to Salesforce, or they're locked into Salesforce in their minds being a Service Cloud product or a Sales Cloud product. And what do you mean we're going to manage our volunteers over here in it as well? Or what do you mean we're going to manage our leave requests or anything that you might put internally for your org that's sort of a back office thing? They might not want a new system. I mean, that could go from they've had previous iterations where they felt like whoever's sitting in your chair didn't listen to them and didn't deliver what works for them, so they may be sort of sour on the idea. They may not like change in general. They may be happy with the way things are. They might feel like they're at a point in their career they don't want to learn something new. I mean, there's a million different things that you need to understand. They could be afraid of technology, so that that they're just afraid they're going to be exposed on some level. And most of these fears are irrational. My experience has been that the people that tend to come to you and feel like they don't know how to use the computer well, they don't know how to use the products well, they actually do a lot better job than they give themselves credit for. Is that they have this sort of myth in their head that an IT person or a computer person, a system administrator, is like some sort of Zen master of everything. Where the reality is they just kind of know how stuff fits together a little more, and they have a little more experience and maybe some more aptitude, but people don't give themselves enough credit. It's kind of the ones you really need to watch out for, in my opinion, are the ones that think they already know everything and got it all figured out, because they're the ones that aren't necessarily as open to new ideas, or to looking at things from a slightly different perspective. Because if you are implementing a new system, something you want to focus on is not just replicating the inefficiencies or the problems of the old system. In general, I mean, we're in 2021, so in general, if you're building something in Salesforce for an organization, there's a good chance they already have some system somewhere of doing it, whatever product that they're using. Those products generally aren't as malleable and as scalable and as easily extendable as Salesforce. So they might, be locked into the fact that, oh, every time I've asked for something, I can't get what it is that I want anyway. They tell me that that's going to cost too much or take too long, or the system doesn't do it. So there's going to be an education process in there if they're new to Salesforce. Which is not to say that other systems can't do any of those things, but hopefully, I think we're all dealing with Salesforce because we understand that it generally is sort of the best system for this kind of stuff, this evolving and making things a little better and giving a more satisfactory customer experience. And then you also have to look at whether you're dealing with internal customers or external customers. You're doing consulting. One line of demarcation there, in my opinion, is going to be, how comfortable you can be with them, how informal you can be. If you work for the same organization and these are people that you've worked with on other projects and that you're going to see around the office, and I know we're kind of all virtual these days, but even still on Zoom or whatever, and that you come with the preconceived notion, however subtle or subconscious it is, that you work for them, that you work for us, you work for the organization. You're one of us. That's sort of a different mindset that you're bringing to the room oftentimes with your internal stakeholders than with an external stakeholder, because they don't know you. They might look at you as an expert because you've been hired, and they assume that you're getting paid well and that you're delivering a project. And again, your executives or the managers are probably the ones at that point that has sort of vetted the consulting company that got hired, right? That have maybe been part of what are the credentials of the people who are going to be working on the project. So but when you get to the user level, which I think is really where the meat of everything is, they don't know Salesforce necessarily. They don't know you. They don't know the company. So you want to focus on realizing that you need to instill confidence in you. I mean, you need to do that across the board anyway. But it's a different paradigm, a different function to do that with outsiders, strangers, people that sort of implicit in the construct of your relationship is you're going to build something for them, and then they're going to be stuck with it for the rest of their careers or or a while at their job, and you're going to go away and you're going to be on another project and you're not going to have to deal with it. There is sort of that feeling sometimes that that as the consultant, as the admin, as the business analyst, whatever term you want to put on that you're not as invested in the success of the application and the usability of the application as they are, because they're the ones that are going to deal with it. So you want to be conscious of that and sort of try to bridge that gap. Your job is to be empathetic, to promote confidence in you and your organization. And one of the ways you can do that is focusing on delivering quick successes. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You can actually do that and sort of iterate through Salesforce and give them, let them see something. Or again, we're talking to here is this a brand new application? Is this a brand new org? Because that's going to be the time from the time you have these meetings to the time you deliver something is going to be longer than if it's an application they're already using that you're looking to make better, or something you can add very quickly. But these are just all the kind of things that need to be in your head. So these techniques that I'm kind of talking about with this is more getting your head straight and understanding what your focus is and what you want to try to deliver in these projects. So let's go to the artifacts. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these. This isn't designed to be a training session on how to do these. And honestly, I'm probably not the person to do that for you if it were. But so it's more about the concepts that I want to talk about with these things than the actual mechanism of using them. There are process flow diagrams, there are swim lane diagrams, entity relationship ERDs, user stories, value matrix, things like that. Let's look at them a little bit further. So the use of these can be twofold. One is so that you yourself can come back and map any of these things. These are the more technical side of what we're talking about here. With, in a process flow diagram over here, the short heroes thing that we have, it's, you're documenting the steps and how does this go, and what are the connections, what's the flow to how it works. You want to do it for yourself so that you can visualize it and understand it. You want to do it potentially for your customer so that they can validate that your understanding of what you've talked about is correct, that you guys are all on the same page. Also, that gives you an opportunity to talk about, this is the kind of the current state, the current flow, but is this necessarily the flow that we want to put into this app, into this org? Do we want to do is there a way we can be more efficient? You can focus on places where you want to automate certain things, that kind of stuff. But data validation's in. Here's a swim lane one, which is very similar to the process flow, but what's different about it is it's kind of broken into sections where you have different phases of whatever's happening. Also, who are the people or the functions that are actually doing those things? So it's kind of popping back and forth. So you can think about it, if your customer that you're speaking with is this swim lane, they're going to focus on the things that they're going to be part of and that they're worried about. It's kind of broken out like that. And then, of course, the entity relationship diagram, you probably don't necessarily get into as much with your customers. A very high level, depends how technical you want to make that and how detailed you want to make that, how technical they are, how interested they are in that kind of stuff. But, it's really good for you yourself to get it right. Also, the third audience for these kind of things, though, are your own team. Again, if you're not doing this project all by yourself, then you might need to communicate with other folks who weren't part of the discovery sessions, how this application needs to function, how it needs to look. And certainly, if you're working on any of those large projects that has dozens of people, or half a dozen to 12 or more people working on the project, and in a larger consulting firm where people are being swapped in and out over time, you certainly need to be more precise and be more detailed in these sort of artifacts, because they might be coming into the project week 6 of an 8-week project, and they need to be able to get up to speed quickly and work. So to that degree, there's a sort of common language and a proper way. I mean, all of these different shapes and colors mean different things, and there is sort of the right way and all these little symbols with the little feet and all that sort of stuff on the entity relationship diagram, but that matters. But so there is something to be said for putting that level of precision and detail into it, as opposed to being more of just like a mock-up or something to keep everybody on the same page. So one of the things you're evaluating in a project is, how detailed of this do you need it to be? I mean, I'm not at all suggesting that every single thing that you do, every app, every update, every change needs to have these kind of things done, because certainly they don't. Or that if you are going to do them, that you have to do them with a level of detail. And these are just illustrative purposes here, but this takes time to deliver these things, and these are sort of, while they help keep a project, especially more complex with more folks on it, on track, and make sure that you don't get too far off kilter anywhere. These themselves, they don't provide the actual value. They're not what you're trying to get to. These are interim steps. So you have to figure out how much time you're willing to spend and you want to spend on the overhead of these things. So you're always going to be asking yourself, what's the value of these? Am I trying to communicate it to myself so that I can validate my own understanding and make sure that it makes sense to me, and I can use these things to look for areas of opportunity, for how I'm going to design things in Salesforce, or how we're going to make recommendations at the process change? Or is it for your customers, or is it for your collaborators and your partners that are working with you on the project? So you have to figure that out. But more on the soft skills side here, we have what I'm calling not as technical, which is a wonderful label for them. A couple of these other artifacts, user stories and value matrix.
Michael,
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt there. Just before we get, I guess, fully into the non-technical side, we do have a question about the technical documents, if that's okay.
Sure.
So Chinmaya asks, basically, whose responsibility should it be to produce these kind of documents? Is it the admin or an architect? That's what they're asking. So I guess like who should be putting together these documents is what they
Right.
want to know.
I don't want to give a cop-out answer to that, but I'm sorry. The answer is really going to be it depends, right? I mean, these roles aren't as starkly defined in the real world as they might be on the Trailhead website, right? So, if you're designing a new application like this, and it's on the right side with the entity relationship diagram, and it's got many new objects and many relationships, you might have an architect involved that's doing that, particularly if there's outside integrations with other systems or tying this new application into existing applications. But that role is going to need to be done whether you have someone who you label as a project architect or not. And your smaller projects or your internal projects don't necessarily have someone who carries the title architect around. In which case, it's going to fall to the admin. I mean, the admin is ultimately the person who's going to be doing the declarative work in this system. Right. These are also opportunities to understand when and if you need to bring in a developer. Are you going to need, Apex or Visualforce to do certain things? And maybe that would go outside of the admin doing that, although there are admins that have developer skills and do some of those things as well. So it's not always a clean line. So the role, I would say, is the business analyst and the architect are doing these sort of technical artifacts, but it's a good chance on a smaller project or small to mid-sized organization that person is also the admin. So it's not necessarily, it's not an admin's responsibility. From my point of view, and obviously I do realize that if you're new to the system and you're not comfortable being a system administrator yet, and you're sort of learning the mechanics of how to do the things in Salesforce, the notion of determining what to build and when and why and how is different, and something you're not as focused on is actually how to actually do it. What are you going to use? Process builder, flow, lightning components, things like that. So certainly start with those things if you can early in your career. Those are the things that you need to master first, and then you sort of move into some of these things, I would say. And if you don't like those things or these functions, they don't mesh with what it is you enjoy doing or what it is you feel you're good at doing, then I would say look for career opportunities that allow you to be on a bigger team with a consulting company or with a larger customer that has a Salesforce team that is 5, 10, 12 people deep, in which case you're probably not going to be asked to necessarily do those things. They'll have someone dedicated for those functions. But in a smaller org, like I spent most of my career, I worked in a state agency, I worked in nonprofit. I've never had more than 2 or 3 other people on the team with me. We're all kind of doing a lot of these things on any given project. I also worked for a consulting firm where we did have these giant projects. And like I said, you would have business analysts who would meet with the clients and do a lot of this discovery and put these together and then never log into Salesforce org or even the sandbox. This is their role. And then once they map these things out, they go on to the next project, the next phase of this project. And then you also have architects that kind of come in and just synthesize the discovery that's been provided and put together these DRDs and things like that. So it does kind of depend, but I think it's something that really helps admins to be able to know how to do, and you might have to.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. And we do have one other question in there, which is sort of related to this topic as well. But the question comes from Donna, and she's asking, is it important for users, stakeholders to be aware of the apps that may only be used by other teams, not referring to the technical flows per se, but may reference that they exist? And asks, would communication among users be beneficial so they feel in the know, at least for those who are heavy users / super users, so that they use those ideas to build on their own or know they exist?
So sure, again, that's knowing your audience, knowing who the people are. In my mind, there's a lot of psychology that goes on with any of these projects. You want to give your customers, your stakeholders, whatever it is that they want that helps keep them engaged. I mean, that's the first thing that that you need. If you have a disengaged or an apathetic customer or someone you're dealing with, it's really hard for you to deliver for them, because it's hard to please someone that doesn't want anything, that isn't interested, right? So if you're in an organization where you have power users and they are excited about the prospect of new things and new applications, even if it isn't something that's going to directly be part of their day to day, if you have the time, I would certainly advocate bringing them into the loop and getting their feedback. For one, multiple sets of eyes can be useful, but they can be also become your advocates and your advocates, I guess, for the next thing. And they can say, hey, I saw that this other group over here has a new application in Salesforce and they're using this feature. I think we could use that. Your customers, if you can empower them to help you be a business analyst and not only think of it in terms of what it is they're trying to deliver, but sort of think sort of macro level, big picture, and how they can improve things. You can work with them on that level, and they can come to you with more fully formed ideas. I mean, you do want to be careful not to that's what I'm looking for. Not to have any of the customers come with a solution. You want them to come to you with an issue or a problem, and then you guys can discuss it and decide what the best Salesforce solution is, rather than just delivering exactly what it is that they've worked out. But certainly to the degree that they can work it out in their own minds and be excited about it, you want to foster that. It can only help you and them and the organization overall. So absolutely do that if you can. All right, on the not as technical side, we have the concept of user story, which is a very, very simple component of how you're going to break down things if you're building, particularly any size project can benefit from it. But again, how much time you're going to spend in writing these. I've worked on projects where literally hundreds of these user stories have been written and tested. A lot of the times on a smaller project, if you're kind of only one working with it and you have a small group, then you can kind of do a lot of these things in your head. But what we're talking about here is, as a customer service representative, I want to understand what the customer's problem is so that I can resolve it. User story's always got those three pieces. So what is the persona of the person performing the work in Salesforce? What are they trying to do, and why are they trying to do it? You structure it like that, and then on the testing side, you can do the similar idea where you can structure it. In the acceptance criteria side of it, it goes to be a little bit more. Talks about security and which features and functions and things like that might be doing it. So given that a case has come in, when I go to the screen flow, am I able to update whichever case that I want to update, or whatever those things kind of be. So you can write, I mean, honestly, I've been in sessions where someone can say, okay, write a user story, right? And then you can say, well, okay, well, now let's break that user story up into 10 other different little sub stories. You can get very granular with it, not suggesting that you want to do that for every project. But when it comes to testing, these things are very useful, because then you have people. It's another function that's for kind of a topic, I guess, mostly for a different day. But a lot of times you'll have testers in these applications that are not necessarily they don't know the project at all. They're not part of the discovery. They're not part of what the user does all the time, and they haven't been part of the build and the design. They're actually coming to it with completely fresh eyes and sort of reading these user stories and reading these acceptance criteria and just validating that based on what it is you said you want to be able to do and why, that you can do whatever and that it'll accomplish the thing that you want, and that's a very useful idea. You also have over here, and this is just, there's a million forms of these things. I just grabbed one off the internet that is a value matrix. So when you're figuring out which projects you want to put in what order, or which features you want to put in which phase, or deliver, or any of these kind of things, you want to be mapping them on their value and the effort that it takes. So the sweet spot is, of course, right up here. Things that have a high degree of value and a low degree of effort, those are the things that you definitely want to do. I mean, they're easy calls that you want to do. And back to earlier when I talked about quick successes, they can sometimes be those things. If you're dealing with people that you don't know very well, that you're trying to, I don't want to say you're trying to impress them. That's the wrong thing. It's not about, chest thumping and saying how great you are, but you want them to understand that you know what you're talking about, and that you care, and that you're also not just in the abstract of the Salesforce that you can do those things, but through their lens. That's the empathy. Through what it is they need to do in their jobs, can you deliver for them? I mean, a very quick and common way that you can get people on board with Salesforce, and I've seen this hundreds of times over my career. It's, my current system, this thing's really awful and I can't deal with this. And then you can show them literally, maybe even in the session, although that's probably not, but maybe a few days after the session or whatever, hey, here's a mock-up of this. You can do this. Would that work for you? Because you guys know, Salesforce admins, there are a lot of things that you can do with very minimal effort. So if it has high value and minimal effort, you want to focus on those right away. Those are definitely going to be included in your project, definitely going to be included in early phases. You want to, get those out as quickly as you can, thoughtfully, as quickly as you can. And of course, the converse is the opposite. If something doesn't provide that much value and it is exceedingly complex to do, you don't want to do those things. One of the things you want to focus on is, how do you increase the value, or how do you make it easier to do? In which case, you can put it in one of these other two yellow sections, right? But by mapping these features, these functions, these projects, whatever it is that's coming through here, again, you can put it in your own mind correctly, but you can also validate your understanding with your customers. Now, they're not necessarily going to be able to talk to you about the effort side of it. That's not something they'll know, but they'll understand the value side of it for sure. Keeping in mind that the value proposition is different to an executive, to a manager, to a user, right? So you want to make sure that you're showing them the right things. It doesn't really help show you that great of a thing to show the executives, well, how quickly they can find the customer record. I mean, yeah, in the abstract, that's a good thing, but it's more meaningful to the user, to the executive. They want to be talking about, the increased sales or the cost savings or things like that. And then you have your other two sections here, the ones that are of little value, but don't require very much effort. And then, of course, the ones that are high value and require a lot of effort. In my mind, you probably want to focus on this upper right side a little more, because you want to focus on delivering value. The value is what your customer is deriving. The effort's more on you. So, obviously there's a cost or a time frame. You have to be mindful of those things. And again, it depends on whether it's an internal project or you're a hired consultant or something like that. But you want to kind of focus on where you want to deliver. You want to figure out. And of course, these are just 4 boxes. But if you were to map them out, you might have a situation where something is closer to the other box. It has higher value, but it's not as much effort. That kind of stuff. You don't have to be too granular. You can think of them in 4 categories. But it's really helpful in determining for you what it is you're going to work on, but also helping you build that rapport and be able to validate and prove to your customers that you're working for them. All right, so got some tips here. So aim and scope, and this aim and scope is taken directly out of one of the Salesforce Trailhead modules. That's how they talk about it. It's a combination of the first 2 sections that I talked about. Who are your customers, and and what type of discovery is it? Is it internal? Is it external? Is it executives, managers, users, those kind of things? You want to be able that what you're focused on. So the aim is kind of what you're after. What information, when you walk into these sessions, what do you need to come away with to be able to make decisions, to be able to figure out how to architect the system or to build the system. You know what information you need to leave the room with or leave the meeting with. They don't. So you have to always be thinking of that in the conversation, but within the scope of who the stakeholder is. You could lose them very quickly if you start asking questions that have nothing to do with anything that they would have knowledge about or particularly interested in. And in the perfect world, you want to be very conversational. You don't want to be interrogating them. You're not cross-examining them. You want it to just sort of flow organically as much as possible. You're steering the conversation, you're driving the conversation, but in a perfect world, you're not just reading off a list of questions. I mean, you may have notes, depending on how detailed, and this is again a little bit with the internal versus the external, because with internal, you're more likely to have access to these folks again in a more informal and casual way than if you're an external, consultant that you might not have the time with them. That it might apply also to executives, whether they're internal or external. It may be harder to get them again, so you have to be more specific about what it is you need to get out of the conversation. But you want to have a general idea of where you want to go, not necessarily have a list of questions. And you want it to be as casual as you can, not professional casual, but you don't want to feel like they're under the microscope or they're being quizzed, because that puts people's defenses up and just doesn't work well. So this is just an example of a question tree. You might know the questions that you need and the answers that you need to get, but there might be different ways to get the answer based on different kinds of questions. You don't always have to go through things in a certain order. You can kind of let the natural rhythm of the conversation go all over the place. You may find yourself going into areas that you didn't anticipate, and you may realize that is an important area and let it go. But if you feel like you're getting too far away from the mission of what you need to come back to, what your aim is, then you need to sort of recalibrate the questions. And again, this is just the generic example that I found on the internet of kind of the way it goes. But the point is, don't just go down question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4. You kind of want the conversation to flow all over the place, but in a structured way so that you know what you need. Again, depending on the level of information, the level of detail that you need to come away from in any session, you may find it useful to have someone else with your group taking notes. It can be very hard to take the notes while you're having the conversation. It can also, even if you're talented at it, which I'm definitely am not, it sort of pulls people away from the conversational aspect of it when you're taking too many notes, whether you're writing it down or putting it on a laptop. So if you have the ability to have somebody else kind of do that with you, that's even better. If you can record it, again, that's a whole different thing too. We'll talk about in a second, but at least you don't have to worry about getting all the precise wording and the precise things. If you're recording it, you can always refer back to it. But back to the rest of the tips. Be aware of leading questions. You want to ask open-ended questions. You don't necessarily want to ask things like, what do you like about this, or what don't you like about this, because it focuses their attention into certain things. You might want to say, what do you think about this? Whether that's you're asking them about an existing application or process that they have that isn't in Salesforce, or whether you're showing them something that you're demoing them something in Salesforce. You don't really want to, bias the answer by asking the question in a certain way. You want to try to ask agnostic questions and let them provide the sentiment or whatever it is that they value. Be mindful of the Hawthorne effect, which you might not know the term. I certainly don't generally think of it this way, but I'm sure you've heard of it. It is that the nature of someone being observed, the knowing that they're being observed, affects the way that they perform. So, it's back to the making it conversational is the same idea, meaning that if the user is, again, if you're dealing with a user that is maybe fear of change, fear of technology, fear of whatever, they're focused on, quote unquote, their best behavior sometimes if they're in these sessions, or that they're looking to give you the answer that they think you're looking for, not necessarily the true the true thoughts of what it is that they think. So you want to try to break those down. They are aware that you're performing discovery with them, so you want to try to be mindful of that and break down and try to find, that you're not talking to someone that's constantly aware that they're being recorded. That's why I talked about maybe recording things. Sometimes that messes with people, and they don't like to be recorded because they don't know who else is going to see it, or they don't want to be as frank as they might be because they don't want to get somewhere else. So think about that kind of idea. You're constantly, you're not mentioning that to them, obviously, because that's going to heighten the Hawthorne effect. But you want to think about breaking that down. Also, you're not the focus, but you are selling yourself. So when you're building rapport, it is appropriate, and it makes sense to sort of tell a little anecdote or a little story of how you overcome this challenge, or that you can illustrate how you can empathize with their situation. But do be cognizant of the fact that you don't want to go on and on and on about you, because you're not getting any information the more you're talking. You're only getting the information the more you're listening. So it's a push-pull, but just be mindful of that line. You do want to convey confidence. You do want to convey empathy. So you definitely should be communicating with them and conversing with them in a real and genuine way. But just make sure you have it lapsed into your rhapsodizing about your philosophies of how everything should be done, right? Because it's not about that. You want to focus on what it is you need. So your communication to them should be about making them comfortable, making them trust in you. Not making, that sounds harsh. Helping to build that trust that they rightfully should have in you. But you don't want to go on too much about that. And then also resist the temptation to solution. You can, by that I mean, don't say, well, hey, I can see how we can do that. We can do that with a screen flow, or we're going to do that with a pick list, or we're going to do that with a validation rule. For one, you're gaining information, so you're probably too soon to be making a decision about how it's going to be done, because there might be information that you haven't yet about this project, about this process, that is going to make it so that you can't deliver it that way. A, B, they don't know what any of those terms that I just said are a lot of the times anyway. So saying those things to them doesn't fully resonate. And if you wanted to communicate to them, you'd have to explain those, and it takes up more time. You might not be the architect on this project if you're doing the business analyst part only, or if you're you have an architect and another team of admins, and they may have a different philosophy on how they want to do something based on whatever the notion is. And also you don't want to commit to something that you can't deliver for whatever reason, even if that lack of commitment is better, because you said, oh, we could do this with a pick list, and then you realize later, oh, they want to do it with multiple values, and that's going to be a little weird. We don't want to use multi-value pick lists if we don't have to. We have other ways we can do it to make it more scalable and things like that. So you don't want to create this expectation or this impression to the customer that they're going to have something specific and then not be able to deliver that, and then that's going to be a problem. But at the same time, as I say that, I think you sometimes can be solutioning in your head. This is where that depends always comes in. I think that sure, people can be business analysts, and I've seen them, I've worked with them, that can be great business analysts that don't really have Salesforce admin background, don't really have the requisite knowledge to necessarily do all that stuff. But to the degree that you can think about, oh, is this going to be a screen flow? Is this going to be a validation role, permission set? The degree that you have some sense of what's going on with it, some idea, even though you're not committing to it, you're not verbalizing it, that can help you, ask different questions. It can help you be thinking about that value matrix being formed in your head. Oh, well, I think we could do this with a simple flow. So that's pretty simple to do, as opposed to we need to get a developer to write a lot of code. So you can think about that stuff in your head and let it inform the question tree that you're going down, but don't necessarily commit verbally or in any way to a certain specific outcome. All right, so we have time for some questions. Do you have any questions, Mark?
That's great. Thanks, Mike. At the moment, I don't see any questions in the chat, but we do have a few minutes remaining. So if anybody does have a question, please feel free to either post it in the Q&A in the chat or to raise your hand using the reactions function that you have. And if you raise your hand, we'll try and actually let you speak so you can actually ask the question yourself if you'd like to. So I'll give it a second or two. So got a question here from Ajay that's just come in, which says,
Yeah.
do you have an example of how you navigate a discussion through a question tree and how you navigated tricky client questions?
An example. Let me think. An example of how you navigate through a question tree. So, so you might want to get to an information where you want to know what sort of automation when their customer, not your customer, their customer should sometimes be notified about something, right? And you might out of something like that, and then you might want to go from how the screens are laid out, and then your customer's going to enter that thing and then get right to that. But then your customer may just want to take you on a journey of some different examples of how the screens should be laid out or whatever. Like, just don't feel like you need to stop or artificially shut down a line of discussion that they're interested in and they're passionate about because you feel like you have to get your information in a specific order. If they tend to jump to something else and that something else is still relevant and it's still on point and it's still useful, then I would encourage you to let them communicate that and then try to find a way conversationally to circle back. I mean, sometimes honestly that circle back is okay, we have 10 minutes left and I have a few other specific questions I need to go through, and you can circle back that way. But if you have the opportunity in the flow, if they give you an opportunity and say, oh yeah, after we do this, and sometimes the customer calls in because they weren't sure what the status of their request was or something like that, then that's when you can go, okay, you have that aim in your mind of the 5 or 8 different bullet points that you want to walk away from, and they may have just given you an opportunity to circle back to one of those. I guess the point is just try to make it as conversational as possible. I think we've all been in conversations with our friends in a group where someone may be talking, you don't want to interrupt them, you have a good anecdote or a good story or something that you want to share, a question that you want to ask, and then by the time you feel like you get the opportunity to say that, kind of the topic is changed and now you're too far from that original comment to just go back. And organically with your friend relationships, depending on how important that need was for you to share your information or ask whatever question it was, you may just let it go and maybe you'll just follow up with them separately down the line, or maybe it's just you've missed your opportunity to tell that funny story that no longer applies directly to the conversation that you're having, and that's fine. You should play that same mentality with these conversations. The difference is, though, if you've gone in with a clearly defined aim and what information you need to come away with, then you do have to find a way to get back to those things. Whereas in a friend conversation, you might just let it go because it's not that important. It's no big deal. You're just talking. With this, you have to find a way. So you're looking for a way to make those connections and bring it back. And again, some of the times it is, can I follow up with you on an email after this with a series of questions in case I didn't get anything? Sometimes it's going to be, I'm sorry, we only have 10 or 15 minutes left. I need to get back here. I mean, you want to try to avoid those if you can, but sometimes you can't, and so, if you see an opportunity to shift the conversation back into a certain way, this isn't really, my point is, as much as you want to make it feel like it's an organic, open-ended conversation like you might have with your friends sitting around talking about whatever it is that you guys enjoy talking about, that can go literally anywhere. This does have boundaries on the conversation. You do need to try to make sure you don't go too far out of those boundaries for too long so that you have enough time to get back in. So you want to make it feel to them as conversational as possible, but you have to be. As far as techniques, I mean, it's just. I know this sounds really bad to say, but it's just feel, right? It's just reading the room and understanding, can I careen this conversation back a slightly different way again? Or do I have to put a hard stop and say, we have to go back over here? You know, obviously to the degree that you can do the first and not the second, everyone's better off. Hopefully that answered your question.
That's great. So just check on the clock. So we are at time, but we do have 3 questions left. So it's up to you, Mike, but do you want to try and answer these questions?
Sure.
Okay, great. So I'll go for the questions and then I think we'll try and leave it at these 3. And then,
Okay.
as I say, we're a bit over time at the moment. So Akib asks, how do you effectively manage clients' expectations?
You know, try to communicate whatever it is you can communicate. I err on the side of slightly over communicating than under communicating. But you know, again, not too far where you're getting too far afield or you're betraying any sort of confidences or sharing things that they can't know. For whatever, whether you're defining your client as your actual organization you're dealing with or the individual people you're dealing with. You know, be as honest and forthright with them. Tell them right away if something you don't think is likely to be delivered for whatever reason. I mean, you know, be professional. Try not to throw anyone under the bus. Don't be like, "Hey, your managers don't want that. I agree with you that it's stupid that they don't want that." I mean, don't be like that. But don't give them false hope if you know something isn't going to go out that way. And then at the same time, if they have a really good idea, they really need something, do your best to deliver it, advocate for it. I mean, you really manage their expectations most effectively, in my opinion, when they can trust that what you say is to your knowledge the best information that you can provide them at that point. So that way, if you're telling them something is likely to happen or not likely to happen or whatever timeframes it's going to happen, they can trust in that, and that helps just set their expectations. You know, just make it clear.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. And Terry asks, any tips on how to keep focused on the 95% regular case and not the 5% edge cases?
I mean, the biggest tip is for you to go into these meetings with a clear vision of what is the 95% and what is the 5%. They may not know what the 5% is, but if you know what the 95% is, then you're going to know if something is outside of that. You know, you can do a little bit of discovery, a little bit of information of validating. Is this an edge case? Is this a rare thing? You know, you can maybe say there are things like, okay, what we're not going to build that functionality, and it's out of scope, or it's, you know, it's too costly or time sensitive, time wise to deliver, even if it's an internal thing. But we do have, you know, ways where your admins are going to be able to fix that, or your power users are going to have special permissions that are going to be able to handle that anomalous situation. Like, we'll have ways that can be dealt with it, even if it isn't as easy as everyone has the ability to point and click and do it. So, you know, again, convey to them and assure them that there is a way to deal with that situation, but that it's probably not going to be built into the core focus of the application, but that there will be options for admins or power users to do certain things. That's probably the best tip I would give on that.
Great, thanks, Mike. And our last question for today is from Ajay, and he asks, have you been in a situation where there are divergent points of views from the stakeholders and you have to capture requirements but are not getting the consensus? Any suggestion on how to handle
that? Yeah, I mean, that's a fun last question, Mark, because we could be here for another hour on that. I would try to be as brief as possible. You know, you're trying to find the lowest common denominator. You're trying to find the things where there are consensus, even when they don't think that there is. If you have truly divergent situations, then you're probably going to want to get a project manager involved if you're not that, or deal with the executives or the stakeholders. You need to make sure that, you know, on the customer side, particularly if it's an external customer, that they figure out what their priorities are. I mean, you can help them with that, but you know, if you've got two sets of users, or you've got users that are completely want something different than what the managers or the executives are saying, you probably want to press pause on the discovery and, you know, sort of have them recalibrate. And, you know, you or your organization, whoever, can try to help them do that, but you need to impress upon them that if they want this to work and make sense and not be in constant state of development and redevelopment, that we need to have a more clear focus on what it is we want. And quite frankly, there are some consultant firms that either don't focus on that or aren't as concerned about that, and they will just kind of keep doing and redoing things over and over again because you just keep paying them. You know, so on the customer side, you want to be mindful that that's not happening, and ideally you want to work with a consultant that doesn't want to get into that. But if it's an internal customer of yours, you definitely need to avoid that, because you'll just be sort of stuck on that hamster wheel forever. So, you know, maybe don't deliver anything until they can be clear. Tell them that you can't move forward until they can reach a consensus, that kind of thing.
Great, thanks, Mike. And that's the end of our questions for this week. So just want to say a very big thank you to everybody for coming today. And next week is the final session of this run. Obviously, we will be evaluating what happens after these sessions going forward. But I just want to say again a big thank you to Mike for speaking today. This next week, as I say, is the final session, and we're going to be joined by Melissa Hill-Dees, who is a fantastic member of the community. Everybody who I know who knows Melissa absolutely adores Melissa, so it's going to be great to be joined by Melissa next week. Just as we close, I want to just mention a quick couple of things, just because they do come up in the chat and things like that. So the recordings are going to be distributed probably early September. We're going to run them all to release them all together in one batch, and an email will be going out to people who've registered for the events that those videos are ready, and then there'll be tweets and posts going out on social media with the links for them as well. The giveaway, as I mentioned, that is being done on a basis of if you register for the series and then attend, each week you get an entry, and the draw will be done after the series is concluded as well. But that's all the bits, the admin I need to do. So just again, want to say a really big thank you for attending today. I'm going to stop the recording now and just say again, thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Mark.